Deep in the remote rainforests of southeastern Papua, the jungle floor is a death trap. Torrential rains turn the ground into swamps crawling with venomous snakes. Clouds of mosquitoes carry deadly diseases. Crocodiles lurk in flooded areas. Big cats stalk through the undergrowth. Human enemies launch surprise attacks from the dense vegetation. For most people, this would be an impossible place to call home. But the Korowai people didn't just survive in this hostile environment. Until the late 1970s, many Korowai groups lived here completely isolated from the outside world, believing they were the only people on Earth. And they developed one of the most extraordinary survival solutions ever created by human beings. They built entire family homes 100 to 140 feet above the forest floor, complete with fireplaces, sleeping areas, and storage. This is how uncontacted tribes built treehouses to survive jungle predators. Please share in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever experienced or learned any traditional survival skills yourself, we'd love to hear your wisdom. Subscribe for more ancient knowledge. To understand why the Korowai built their homes so impossibly high, you first need to understand the relentless dangers that surround them on the jungle floor. In the lowland rainforests of southeastern Papua, Indonesia, the ground is not solid earth, but a constantly shifting maze of threats. During the wet season, torrential downpours can dump several inches of rain in a single hour, transforming the forest floor into a network of rushing streams and stagnant pools. These floods don't just bring water, they bring everything that lives in it. Saltwater crocodiles, some measuring over 15 feet long, navigate these temporary waterways with deadly efficiency. Venomous snakes, including the aggressive death adder and various pit vipers, are displaced from their usual territories and seek higher ground, often ending up exactly where humans might shelter. The insect life alone would drive most people to madness. Clouds of mosquitoes rise from every puddle and stagnant pool, carrying malaria, dengue fever, and other tropical diseases that can kill within days. Biting flies attack exposed skin with such ferocity that even brief exposure can leave a person covered in welts and potential infections. Ground-dwelling spiders, some with leg spans reaching 6 inches, emerge from flooded burrows to hunt in the temporary chaos. And these are just the creatures you can see. The human threats are equally severe. For generations, the Korowai lived in a state of constant vigilance against raids from neighbouring clans and tribes. War parties could approach through the dense undergrowth completely undetected, launching surprise attacks that left entire families dead or captured. The jungle floor offers no early warning system, no clear lines of sight, no defensive advantage whatsoever. Every rustling leaf could signal approaching danger, every shadow could conceal an enemy warrior. But the Korowai found an answer that seems almost impossible until you see it with your own eyes. Instead of fighting the jungle floor, they abandoned it entirely. They moved their entire lives up into the forest canopy, building complete family dwellings that tower 100 to 140 feet above the ground. These are not simple platforms or temporary shelters. They are sophisticated homes with designated sleeping areas, cooking spaces with working fireplaces, and storage areas for food, tools, and weapons. Some houses are large enough to accommodate extended families of 12 to 15 people, with separate areas for men's and women's activities. The Korowai are a small indigenous people who, until the late 1970s, lived in almost complete isolation from the outside world. Many groups believed they were the only human beings in existence, calling themselves simply the people in their own language. Their entire architectural tradition developed independently, guided purely by centuries of observation and experimentation with the forest environment. They had no written plans, no metal tools, no examples from other cultures to copy. Every technique, every structural innovation, Every safety feature was discovered through trial, error, and hard-won experience passed down through generations. What they created defies everything most people think they know about primitive building techniques. These treehouses represent one of the most sophisticated survival engineering solutions ever developed by human beings. The physics alone are staggering. A typical Korowai family home, built 100 feet above ground, must support the weight of multiple people, stored food supplies, cooking fires, and the dynamic forces of wind and weather, all while swaying gently with the movement of the living tree that supports it. The entire structure is held together not with nails or metal fasteners, but with an intricate system of knots and lashings using nothing but forest vines and wooden joints. The treehouse solves every major survival challenge at once. Floods cannot reach them. Snakes and ground predators cannot climb the smooth trunks of the carefully selected trees. Mosquitoes and biting insects are far less numerous at canopy level. Enemy war parties cannot approach unseen, and even if they reach the base of the tree, the ladder can be pulled up, turning the home into an impregnable fortress. In Korowai spiritual beliefs, dangerous spirits and ghosts move along the forest floor at night, making height not just physical protection, but spiritual safety as well. This is engineering without blueprints, architecture guided by intimate knowledge of the forest rather than textbooks or formal training. The Korowai have created villages in the sky, and their methods hold lessons that could revolutionize how we think about survival, construction, and living, in harmony with hostile environments. The foundation of every Korowai treehouse begins with a single critical decision that will determine whether the family lives or dies. They must choose the right tree. Not just any large tree will work. The builders are looking for specific species, particularly the massive fig trees known locally as wanim or wanbom, and certain types of banyan trees that possess a unique structural advantage. These trees don't rely solely on their main trunk for support. Instead, they send down aerial roots from their branches, roots that gradually thicken and harden into what biologists call prop roots. Over time, these prop roots become like additional trunks, creating a natural support system that can bear enormous weight without toppling. A mature banyan suitable for house construction might have a main trunk 6 to 8 feet in diameter, surrounded by dozens of these prop roots, each 1 to 3 feet thick. The root system extends deep into the ground and spreads outward in all directions, creating an underground network that can anchor against the strongest winds. When Korowai builders examine a potential house tree, they're not just looking at the trunk above ground. They're evaluating an entire living structural system that has been testing itself against storms, floods, and time for decades or even centuries. Once the tree is selected, the builders turn it into what engineers would recognize as a central support column. The top of the main trunk is cut or broken off at the desired height, typically between 80 and 140 feet above ground. This creates a flat platform area where the house frame will rest. The living tree becomes the foundation, the primary load-bearing element, and the central pillar all at once. It's a foundation that continues to grow and strengthen even as the house sits on top of it. But no treehouse can rely on a single tree alone, no matter how massive. The Korowai have learned to distribute the load across multiple supports. They identify smaller trees or large branches within reach of their chosen main tree and incorporate them into the structural system. Sometimes they plant fast-growing tree species near their chosen site years in advance, essentially farming their future building materials. These secondary supports don't need to be as strong as the main tree because they're sharing the load, but they provide crucial stability against swaying and tilting. The building materials come entirely from the forest around them, but not just any forest materials will work at such extreme heights. Weight becomes a critical factor when you're building more than 10 stories above the ground. Heavy materials would put too much stress on the tree, and create dangerous swaying in high winds. The Korowai have identified the perfect combination of strength and lightness in their material choices. For the main structural beams and floor supports, they select specific types of hardwood, known for their straight grain and resistance to rot. These woods are dense enough to bear weight, but light enough not to overburden the tree. Bamboo and similar hollow-stemmed plants provide secondary framing elements. The hollow structure gives them excellent strength-to-weight ratios, the same principle used in modern engineering for everything from bicycle frames to airplane wings. The walls and roofing come from sago palms, which serve a dual purpose in Korowai life. The inner pith of sago palms provides their primary food source, a starchy substance that can be processed into flour and formed into their staple bread. The outer bark and fronds become building materials. Nothing is wasted. A single sago palm can feed a family for weeks and provide enough building material for walls and roof sections. The bark panels are naturally water resistant and provide excellent insulation against both heat and cold. Perhaps most crucial are the rattan vines that serve as the forest's equivalent of rope, nails and bolts, all combined into one material. Rattan is not actually a vine, but a climbing palm that can grow to extraordinary lengths, sometimes over 600 feet long. When properly prepared, rattan becomes incredibly strong and flexible. The surface of rattan is covered with tiny backward-pointing spines that grip into wood fibers when the vine is wrapped and knotted. As rattan dries, it contracts slightly, actually tightening the joints over time rather than loosening them like metal fasteners might in a constantly moving structure. These materials represent thousands of years of experimentation and refinement. Each element has been tested not just for strength and durability, but for how it behaves in the specific conditions of a swaying treehouse over 100 feet above the forest floor. Building a home 100 feet above the ground without modern tools or machinery requires a level of planning and coordination that would challenge even experienced construction crews today. The Korowai accomplish this feat using only their accumulated knowledge, physical strength, and an intricate understanding of physics that has been refined over countless generations. There are no blueprints, no measuring tapes, no safety equipment. Every dimension is judged by body spans, arm lengths, and the experienced eye of master builders who have constructed dozens of these aerial homes. The planning process begins months before construction starts. Village elders and experienced builders gather to discuss the family's needs, the threats they face in their current location, and the availability of suitable trees in the area. They consider seasonal flood patterns, prevailing wind directions, proximity to sago gardens and hunting grounds, and the political situation with neighbouring clans. The height of the house is determined by balancing safety against practicality. Higher means safer from ground threats but more difficult to build and access. Lower means easier construction but greater vulnerability. Once the location and tree are selected, the most dangerous phase begins. The builders must climb to the desired height using only notches cut into the trunk, natural handholds, or simple ladders made from smaller trees. At heights of 80 to 140 feet, a single mistake means certain death. The men who do this work develop extraordinary balance and strength, moving through the canopy with an ease that seems impossible to outside observers. They carry stone axes and simple iron tools obtained through rare trade contacts, implements that must accomplish what power saws and hydraulic equipment do in modern construction. The first major construction step involves preparing the central tree to serve as the main support column. The builders cut or break off the top of the trunk at the chosen height, creating a flat platform area typically 3 to 4 feet across. This requires precise cuts with primitive tools while maintaining perfect balance on branches or temporary platforms. The cut must be clean and level to provide proper support for the house frame that will rest on top of it. Next comes the critical phase of creating the main floor frame. Long straight beams, often 20 to 30 feet in length, must be lifted to the construction height and positioned around the central trunk. This requires coordinated teamwork as multiple builders work together to hoist these heavy timbers using only ropes made from forest vines. The beams are lashed horizontally around the trunk, forming a square or rectangular outline that will define the floor area of the house. To distribute the enormous weight and provide stability against wind and swaying, additional support posts are positioned at the corners and sometimes along the sides of the frame. These might be smaller living trees within reach of the main structure, or poles cut from other trees and positioned vertically. Each support point must be carefully calculated to share the load without creating weak points that could fail catastrophically. The builders understand through experience how forces travel through their structures, knowledge that has been earned through both successes and tragic failures over generations. The floor itself consists of closely spaced wooden slats laid perpendicular to the main frame beams and lashed in place with rattan bindings. The spacing is crucial. Too far apart and people could fall through. Too close together and the floor becomes unnecessarily heavy and doesn't allow smoke from cooking fires to escape properly. The gaps also permit some insects to pass through rather than becoming trapped inside the house, while still providing solid support for the family's activities. Wall construction requires lifting lighter materials to the platform height. Sago bark panels and woven screens are attached to vertical frames that connect to the floor structure. These walls don't bear structural weight, but provide privacy, wind protection, and security. Openings are left for a low doorway and strategic ventilation gaps that help control airflow and smoke from cooking fires. The roof represents the final major construction challenge. Thick bundles of palm fronds must be carried up the ladder and arranged in overlapping layers that shed rainwater effectively. The roof pitch must be steep enough for tropical downpours to run off quickly, but not so steep that it catches too much wind. Rafters cut from lightweight but strong wood support the thatching, and everything is bound together with the same rattan lashing system used throughout the structure. What makes Korowai treehouses truly remarkable is not just their height, but their sophisticated engineering that allows them to survive in an environment of constant motion. Unlike buildings anchored to solid ground, a treehouse must accommodate the natural movement of its living foundation. When tropical storms sweep through the forest with winds exceeding 60 miles per hour, the supporting tree bends and sways dramatically. A rigid structure would snap under these forces, but Korowai builders have created houses that dance with the wind instead of fighting it. The secret lies in their use of flexible connections throughout the entire structure. Every joint, every beam connection, every wall attachment uses rattan lashings that allow controlled movement while maintaining structural integrity. Think of the difference between a stiff metal rod and a fishing pole. The metal rod will bend to a point and then break catastrophically. The fishing pole bends smoothly along its entire length, distributing stress and returning to its original shape when the force is removed. Korowai treehouses work on the same principle, but in 3 dimensions with dozens of interconnected flexible joints. The rattan lashings themselves represent a masterpiece of natural engineering. When fresh rattan is wrapped around wooden beams and knotted tightly, the surface spines bite into the wood grain, creating friction that prevents slipping. As the rattan ages and dries, it contracts slightly, actually tightening the joint over time. This is the opposite of what happens with metal fasteners, which can loosen as wood expands and contracts with moisture changes. The dried rattan also retains flexibility, allowing joints to move under stress without breaking. When the house sways in high winds, each lashing acts like a small shock absorber, sharing the load and preventing any single point from being overstressed. The builders understand that different parts of the house experience different types of forces. The floor must bear vertical weight from people and stored goods. The walls face horizontal wind loads. The roof must shed water while resisting updrafts that could tear it away. Each area uses lashing patterns specifically designed for its particular stresses. Floor joints use wrap patterns that resist downward pulling forces. Wall attachments use diagonal lashings that distribute horizontal loads. Roof ties use techniques that hold against both downward rain loads and upward wind suction. Inside the treehouse, the management of smoke and ventilation reveals another layer of engineering sophistication. Cooking fires burn on raised stone hearths, positioned strategically within the living space. The smoke from these fires serves multiple purposes beyond cooking. It helps preserve stored food, repels insects that might otherwise infest the house, and provides a signal to other clan members about the family's presence and activities. But managing smoke at such heights requires understanding air currents and pressure differentials that most modern people never consider. The carefully calculated gaps in the floor and walls create a passive ventilation system that draws smoke upward and outward without creating dangerous downdrafts that could spread fire. Warm air from the cooking fire rises naturally, carrying smoke with it toward the roof area where strategic openings allow it to escape. The height above the damp forest floor keeps the smoke drier and more effective, while the constant gentle movement of the tree helps circulate air throughout the living space. Temperature control becomes crucial when your house sways more than 100 feet above ground. The elevation provides natural cooling as air temperatures drop with altitude and wind speeds increase above the forest canopy. But the builders must balance this cooling effect against the need for protection during tropical storms and the cool temperatures that can occur at night, even in the tropics. The palm thatch roof and sago bark walls act as natural insulation, blocking direct sunlight during the day while allowing moisture to escape and preventing condensation inside the living space. Load distribution throughout the structure demonstrates the builder's intuitive understanding of structural engineering principles. The weight of people, stored food, tools, and household goods must be spread across multiple load paths to prevent any single element from failing. The central tree trunk carries the primary vertical loads, but corner posts and secondary supports share this burden. Horizontal beams transfer loads between support points, while the flexible floor structure distributes concentrated loads from people walking or gathering in one area. The Korowai have learned through generations of experience exactly how many people their houses can safely accommodate, knowledge gained through both successful gatherings and tragic overloading incidents that taught hard lessons about structural limits. Life in a Korowai treehouse begins before dawn with the gentle swaying motion that rocks the entire family as tropical winds move through the forest canopy. Children learn to walk on floors that shift slightly underfoot, developing extraordinary balance and spatial awareness from their earliest years. By age 4 or 5, Korowai children can navigate the long ladder between ground and home with confident ease, carrying bundles of firewood or containers of water that would challenge many adults living in conventional houses. The ladder itself becomes a daily test of strength and courage, a 60 to 100 foot climb that must be completed multiple times each day for the most basic survival activities. Inside the elevated home, family life revolves around carefully organized spaces that maximize the limited floor area while accommodating the social structures that govern Korowai society. Men's areas are typically positioned near the entrance and weapons storage, while women's spaces center around food preparation and the main cooking hearth. Children sleep in areas that provide protection from accidental falls while allowing them to observe and learn adult activities. Extended families of 10 to 15 people can share these aerial homes, with each person understanding their designated space and responsibilities within the confined but efficiently organized living area. The daily routine of hunting, gathering, and food processing takes on extraordinary complexity when your home sits more than 100 feet above the resources you need for survival. Korowai men are skilled hunters who pursue wild pigs, tree kangaroos, birds, and other forest animals using bows and arrows, spears, and ingenious traps. But every successful hunt requires transporting heavy game up the precarious ladder system, often in groups as hunters work together to hoist large animals to the house level. Women process sago palm pith, their primary food source, in locations near the trees where the palms grow, then carry the processed starch up to the treehouse for final preparation and storage. The sago harvesting process itself demonstrates the intimate connection between Korowai architecture and their subsistence system. A single mature sago palm can provide enough starch to feed a family for several weeks, but processing requires cutting down the entire tree, splitting the trunk, and extracting the fibrous pith that is then washed and strained to separate the edible starch. The locations of productive sago groves determine where families build their tree houses, and the cyclical depletion of nearby sago resources drives the decision to abandon one house and build another in a new area with fresh food resources. Korowai society operates through patrilineal clans that trace descent through the father's line, with each clan controlling specific territories that include the rights to particular trees suitable for house construction, sago groves, and hunting grounds. When a young man decides to build a new treehouse, whether for marriage, family expansion, or simply to demonstrate his skill and courage, the project becomes a clan undertaking that strengthens social bonds and establishes obligations between relatives. Brothers, cousins, and uncles contribute labour, expertise, and materials, creating networks of mutual support that extend far beyond the individual family that will occupy the finished house. The most spectacular tree houses, those reaching heights of 120 to 140 feet, often represent more than practical shelter. Young men build these extreme structures as demonstrations of courage, skill, and worthiness as potential husbands and clan leaders. The height becomes a form of social competition, with each new house attempting to surpass previous achievements. These showpiece houses require enormous labour investment and carry significantly higher risks during both construction and daily use. But they establish the builder's reputation throughout the region and can influence marriage negotiations and political alliances between clans. Religious beliefs and spiritual practices shape every aspect of treehouse construction and habitation. The Korowai worldview includes complex relationships with forest spirits, ancestral ghosts, and supernatural forces that influence where houses can be safely built and when families must relocate. Certain trees are considered spiritually dangerous and cannot be used for construction regardless of their physical suitability. Housewarming ceremonies involve ritual offerings and the application of protective substances, such as animal fat smeared at doorways and structural joints to ward off malevolent influences. The spiritual dimension extends to beliefs about the forest floor itself, which many Korowai consider the domain of dangerous spirits that emerge at night to threaten human welfare. The elevation of their homes provides not just physical protection but spiritual safety, placing families above the supernatural dangers that move through the darkness below. The Korowai are not alone in their mastery of elevated living. Throughout the island of New Guinea and across the tropical world, indigenous peoples have independently discovered that survival often depends on getting above the dangers that lurk at ground level. The Kombai people, who live in territories adjacent to Korowai lands, have developed their own sophisticated treehouse traditions that share fundamental principles while differing in crucial details. Kombai houses typically reach heights of 30 to 60 feet, lower than the most extreme Korowai structures, but still high enough to escape floods, predators, and human enemies. Their construction techniques emphasize broader platforms and more elaborate interior divisions, reflecting different social organization and family structures. Across the highlands and lowlands of Papua New Guinea, dozens of distinct ethnic groups have created variations on the theme of elevated architecture. The Huli people build houses on tall stilts that lift living spaces 8 to 12 feet above marshy ground. The Dani construct elevated granaries and ceremonial structures that protect valuable resources from both natural disasters and human raids. Each group has adapted the basic concept of elevation to their specific environmental challenges and cultural needs, creating a diverse catalogue of solutions to similar survival problems. The principle extends far beyond New Guinea. Throughout the river deltas and coastal wetlands of Southeast Asia, traditional stilt houses rise above seasonal floodwaters that can persist for months. In the Mekong Delta of Vietnam, entire villages stand on wooden posts that elevate homes and businesses above the highest flood levels recorded in living memory. The construction techniques differ dramatically from Korowai methods, using different wood species, metal fasteners, and architectural styles, but the underlying logic remains identical. Get above the water and stay dry. Tie stilt houses along the Chao Phraya River demonstrate how elevation solves multiple problems simultaneously. The raised floors stay above floodwaters while allowing cooling breezes to circulate underneath the house. The space beneath the structure becomes valuable storage and work area during dry seasons, then transforms into boat parking during floods. Livestock can shelter under the house during storms, and the elevation provides clear sight lines for spotting approaching threats or opportunities. In the Amazon basin, several indigenous groups have developed elevated platforms and tree-based shelters, though rarely reaching the extreme heights achieved by the Korowai. The Yanomami build large communal houses called chaponos that incorporate elevated sleeping areas within ground-level structures, while some Brazilian tribes create hunting platforms and temporary shelters in forest canopies. The shared challenge of tropical insects, flooding, and predator avoidance has led to similar architectural solutions across continents. Even in temperate regions, elevation has provided crucial survival advantages. Native American peoples of the Pacific Northwest built elevated food storage platforms that kept dried salmon and other preserved foods above the reach of bears, wolves, and ground-dwelling scavengers. These structures used principles of load distribution and weather resistance that parallel techniques found in tropical tree houses, adapted to different materials and climate conditions. The engineering patterns that emerge across these diverse cultures reveal universal principles that transcend specific building traditions. Single strong central supports, whether living trees or constructed posts, provide primary load-bearing capacity. Secondary supports distribute weight and resist lateral forces from wind and seismic activity. Lightweight construction materials reduce stress on the support system while providing adequate protection from weather. Flexible connections allow structures to move with environmental forces rather than resisting them rigidly. Water management appears as a constant concern across all elevated architecture traditions. Steep roof angles shed precipitation quickly. Raised floors prevent moisture absorption from ground contact. Strategic gaps in floors and walls allow air circulation that prevents condensation and mold growth. These solutions appear independently in tropical rainforests, temperate river valleys, and coastal wetlands, suggesting that certain engineering principles are discovered repeatedly when humans face similar environmental challenges. The choice of building materials reflects local ecology but follows consistent logic. Builders select the strongest available wood for primary structural elements. They identify the most durable materials for weather exposure while choosing lighter options for secondary components. They develop techniques for processing and preparing materials that maximize strength while minimizing weight and maintenance requirements. Perhaps most significantly, These elevated building traditions demonstrate humanity's remarkable ability to read environmental conditions and develop appropriate technological responses using only locally available resources and accumulated knowledge passed down through generations of practical experience. The wisdom embedded in Korowai treehouse construction extends far beyond the specific techniques of lashing vines and selecting trees. At its foundation lies a profound understanding of how to read and respond to environmental conditions that most modern people have completely lost. Korowai builders spend years observing how different tree species respond to storms, which areas flood during heavy rains, where dangerous animals travel, and how seasonal changes affect the forest ecosystem. This knowledge comes not from books or formal education, but from daily intimate contact with the environment that will either support or kill them. This approach to learning represents a fundamental difference from modern construction methods. Contemporary builders rely on engineered materials with predetermined specifications, standardized building codes, and detailed blueprints that can be followed anywhere, regardless of local conditions. The Korowai method demands deep site-specific knowledge that can only be gained through years of careful observation. They understand that no two trees are identical, no two locations present exactly the same challenges, and no single solution works universally. Every treehouse must be custom designed for its specific tree, location, and the particular threats faced by that family. The Korowai concept of impermanence offers another crucial lesson for modern survival thinking. While contemporary construction aims for maximum durability and permanence, Korowai treehouses are designed to last only 5 to 6 years before materials begin to weaken and families relocate to new areas with fresh resources. This planned obsolescence is not a failure of their building techniques, but a sophisticated safety strategy that prevents catastrophic structural failure while aligning with their mobile lifestyle patterns. By rebuilding regularly, they ensure that their shelters never become dangerously deteriorated and they avoid overexploiting the resources in any single area. This philosophy of impermanence also reflects a deeper understanding of risk management. Rather than trying to build structures that can withstand every possible disaster, the Korowai accept that some events will inevitably destroy homes, and focus instead on developing the skills and knowledge necessary to rebuild quickly when disasters occur. This approach requires maintaining active building expertise throughout the community, rather than relying on specialists or external contractors. Every adult male knows how to construct a treehouse, and many women understand the material preparation and finishing techniques essential for creating livable spaces. The exclusive use of local materials creates an entirely different relationship between builders and their environment than exists in modern construction. Every beam, every vine, every roof panel comes from the immediate area and returns to the forest when the house is eventually abandoned. This creates a closed-loop system with virtually no waste and no environmental impact beyond the temporary use of materials that continue growing and regenerating throughout the house's lifespan. The building process itself requires intimate knowledge of material properties, seasonal availability, and sustainable harvesting techniques that ensure future resources remain available. Working with living materials demands skills that have been largely lost in modern construction. Korowai builders must understand how different woods respond to stress, how vines behave as they age and dry, how palm materials change characteristics with weather exposure, and how all these materials interact as a complete system over time. They work with materials that continue changing throughout the building's life, requiring maintenance techniques and replacement strategies that modern builders never encounter. The social aspects of Korowai construction reveal another dimension of wisdom. Building a treehouse requires coordinated group effort that strengthens clan relationships and ensures that construction knowledge passes to the next generation. Young men learn by participating in multiple construction projects before attempting their own builds, gaining practical experience under the guidance of master builders who have successfully completed dozens of houses. This apprenticeship system ensures that critical knowledge survives even if individual experts die or leave the community. The integration of defense, shelter, and daily life functions into a single architectural solution demonstrates systems thinking that modern survival approaches often lack. Rather than addressing threats individually with separate solutions for floods, predators, insects, and human enemies, the treehouse provides comprehensive protection while supporting all the activities necessary for family survival. This holistic approach requires understanding how different survival needs interact and influence each other, knowledge that can only develop through generations of practical experience in hostile environments. Perhaps most importantly, Korowai architecture demonstrates that sophisticated engineering solutions can emerge from careful observation and practical experimentation without formal scientific training or modern tools.